100.1 FM, Curtin Radio.
Well, he's back. He's been around, feels like going around the world, 6,000 kilometres. Trevor Tough, of course, is with us from Outback Graves. He gets out there with his group. They go out there and go to the unmarked graves, and you find out all about the people, and you give them a bit of dignity, don't you?
We do. We have a lovely time. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah.
Lovely time for you, Trev. You're doing how many K on unsealed roads?
Out of the 6,000 was probably about 4,500.
It's when you don't come out sort of talking
Beautiful,
like that.
Yeah.
Do they grade? Do they grade the roads quite often?
The roads are very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Actually, I was reading today in the paper that a lot of people that are venturing off with caravans, maybe for the first time, are not that experienced on the roads, and they're not used
some
to
of
the
them
driving.
are just dangerous. Yeah.
Maybe they should be looking at getting a bit more experience.
Catch a bus, I think, would be better for them.
Well, we all think it's going to be easy, but it's pretty tough going out there.
Yeah, well, I've done it all my life.
I know you
suppose,
have.
so
You're different.
it's just happy.
The unmarked graves, of course, you managed to, look at 150 this time?
No, this trip we only put in about 35, but we found about another 31.
Oh, okay.
And they're mostly really isolated ones out on the stations.
Yeah.
And the station folk are wonderful, because we go to them with, here's our list of who we think's on the station, and they know where some of them are.
I'm sure they do.
And they can guide us to them.
That stories would have passed down from family to family if they'd been there a long time.
Yeah, sadly, not a lot of family stations, or not a lot of stations are still owned by families.
Probably not.
So gradually getting gobbled up, yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So, do they know you're coming?
Oh, yes, yeah. We do all the land clearances and that first.
Okay,
it's
good
poor
idea.
form to just turn up and start driving around someone's station.
I was just checking. Now, you turned up this morning with an array of, looked like beautiful little jars of spices, but in fact, what were they?
Well, in fact, they are spice jars, yeah. And my wife, Susie, kindly bought me a spice rack set, and we had to empty all the spices out. And I'd taken soil samples because I just love the colours.
Oh, aren't they amazing?
And the range of colours is just astounding. There's 12 in this set I've made.
Well, they go from blues to pink to deep, rich
mauves.
burgundies to mauves.
Yeah,
what does
grey.
that indicate?
Oh, it's all just different soil types. And
But would
I've
they show
taken
minerals or something?
Some do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, what would be the distance between one soil colour to another soil colour?
Oh, sometimes just 100 metres or a few hundred metres, yeah. You get an outcrop of one particular type of soil.
So we don't really know what it does indicate for the colouring of the soils.
I guess someone knows, but I just like the colours.
I won't. You look at the aesthetics. I'd love to know the history of the soils as to why they have taken on those colours. There's got to be a reason.
If you're in gold country, you get certain sets of rocks and outbreaks there.
Okay, let's get started. Give us the update, the 6,000 trip through the Murchison, Gascoyne and Pilbara.
Yeah, we did that, and the furthest north we got to was at Condon, which is the original port before Port Hedland was established, and it's about 200 k's or 150
Is that where the tall
k's.
ships used to come in?
That's right, yeah. And they would, at low tide, they would just sit on the sand, and the bullock teams would take the bales of wool out there, and they would load them onto the ships and take it off to England for
Didn't have to have a long wharf or a jetty or anything?
No jetty at all.
Okay.
No. And it was also where the site of an early overseas telephone cable to the Dutch East Indies left Australia there. And there was 11 graves. We marked all those. Only one of them has a headstone, but we put the rest in lines.
Yeah.
And then we spent a couple of weeks searching for graves of some of the pioneers with the help of the station folk. And we located 31 that we will make plaques for, and we'll go back out there next year and mark those. And they're dotted around. Some are seriously isolated.
And you have a team, we've mentioned this before, of course, researching through the death certificates in the past. Isn't that where the records were always kept? Not all?
Yeah, burial certificates and for the ones that are in known cemeteries.
Yeah.
And newspaper articles, police reports, all that sort of stuff.
You have to rely on that. But if they're on a station, you were still able to retrieve a bit of info.
Oh, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Causes of death at Mount.
Yeah, it's
Morris.
quite interesting. And Outback Grave Markers are probably the only people who collate the causes of death for these early communities. And it gives us an insight into the nature of the town and what life might have been like in those days. And Mount Morgans, which we're looking at today, was a boom and bust town which went from nothing to a population of 600, producing more than 60,000 ounces of gold per year, and it went from that to bust in only 12 years.
They got all the gold out, did they?
Yeah, that's it. The gold ran out, and that was the end of the town.
Yep, pretty much.
So when we look at out of the 57 deaths that we have registered for Mount Morgans, with mine deaths, 3 blokes were killed in explosions in the one event. One guy was pulled into a flywheel and killed. There was a fall of stone, and another one fell down a shaft.
All a bit nasty.
And with the infants and children, it's really a bit upsetting at times. There were 6 of them stillborn out of 22. 5, the causes were unknown. So a lot of times they just got sick and they died. The balance were a variety of causes, including gastro and teething during the hottest time of the year. One little boy was killed when he was kicked by a horse at the age of 15 months, and one girl, aged 12, died from burns when her dress caught fire while she was engaged in lighting the stove.
Oh, that's horrible.
And when you look at adults by age, out of all of the adults there, 9 of them were in their 20s, 11 were in their 30s, another 9 were in their 40s, and only 2 were aged more than 50, and another 2 aged more than 60. So it was a very young population.
The younger, they were more risk takers, I suppose.
That's right, yeah. And well, mining still is a young man's game, I suppose.
True.
And adults by cause, there were 6 mine accidents, 6 from pneumonia or influenza. So influenza killed quite a lot of people in those days. 3 from typhoid or gastro, 6 from heart diseases, 1 from a lady in childbirth, and 2 suicides.
There wouldn't have been a lot of medical help out there in those days, would there?
There was actually a doctor
there. Oh, God, he would have been busy.
Morgans, yeah.
Wouldn't have had a hospital or anything, though, would they?
Yeah, we'll tell you a bit about the hospital in a while.
All right. We'll take a quick break. Back shortly.
Curtin Radio.
And we're talking to Trevor Tough from Outback Graves. And tell us more about Mount Morgan and the people that were there very bravely.
Mount Morgans was a little town. I told you a bit about how it was started off, and the last time you might remember that they wanted to release some land there, and the only way they could decide who would get the land was they had a race from Mount Margaret to Mount Morgans. And
what, on back of horse? Or?
Oh, all sorts.
Really?
All sorts, yeah.
Oh, that would have been
a very funny story. So all the stories I've got for you today are about Mount Morgans, which is in the Shire of Laverton. And the first one is 3 young fellas, Patrick Doughty, aged 28, Felix Grogan, aged 25, and Michael John Higgins, aged 22. And these 3 young men were all killed in an explosion of dynamite on the number 1 level of the Westralia mine at Mount Morgans on the 13th of April 1899. And all had come from Southern Cross. A mine there had closed down and they'd moved to Mount Morgans, and it was their second day at work at Westralia, and all 3 were killed.
They would have had a great hope for the future by getting there, and look what happened.
Patrick Kirby was a miner with a wife called Isabella, and he was aged 58 years when he committed suicide by drowning. He threw himself down Farrell's Well on the 6th of April 1904.
Goodness.
And William Henry Armstrong and his family, this is quite a tale. William was an accountant and he was married to Catherine Armstrong. About the end of September in 1901, Catherine gave birth to a little girl they also named Catherine. And sadly, a few weeks after giving birth, Catherine, the mother, died aged only 29 on the 21st of October 1901. Her death certificate shows the cause as syncope, which is fainting due to lack of blood supply to the brain, although there were allegations the medical officer was drunk. Doesn't sound too good, does it? Her husband, William, aged 33, was terribly affected by her death, which caused him on the 14th of November to take his own life by ingesting prussic acid.
Oh, my God.
His agony can't imagined.
Think
Awful.
about it.
And their new little daughter, little Catherine, at the age of 8 weeks and in care, died from an unknown cause on the 20th of November 1901, a week after her father. So the whole family was dead and buried at Mount Morgans. Catherine and her daughter were buried together, with William nearby, and we'll be marking all their graves in October.
What a sad life.
It is, yeah. These stories, it just makes you feel a lot of effort went into building Western Australia.
You're not kidding.
So William Cayley was a prospector and contractor, and he made it to the ripe old age of 69 until he died of intestinal hemorrhage on the 1st of June 1902. These are the two oldest buried there. And John McLean was a greengrocer and fruiterer. Perhaps due to a better diet than most, he lived to the age of 70, but he died at Mount Morgans on the 23rd of September 1903 from asphyxia and the rupture of an artery. In that year, Mount Morgans hit its peak gold production of 64,945
Whoa,
ounces.
what would that be worth today?
Something like 130 million.
Yes, exactly.
In 1 year.
What if there's anything left up there?
Nothing.
Did you have a look? Oh, okay.
I can only find old nails and tins. Yeah. So another story is about Jessie and Charlie Slythe, and they were twins born to Bella and George Henry Slythe. On the 23rd of October 1901, at the age of only 10 weeks, Jessie died at Mount Morgans from diarrhoea, and only a week later, so did her twin brother Charlie. With limited water for hygiene and a lack of effective treatment for diseases, many other little children also died of this cause. David Henderson. David was one of 4 boys born to Elizabeth and William Henderson, and William was a blacksmith at Mount Morgans, and blacksmiths were often also farriers shoeing horses. No doubt little David at the age of 15 months had become unafraid of them, but sadly at 4 p.m. on the 29th of December 1902 he was kicked by a horse and died 9 hours later. On the 29th of December 2000, a plaque in memory of David was placed on his grave by his brother John F. Henderson, and John was born on the 1st of January 1907. So John was within a few days of turning 93 when he put that plaque up.
That'd be unusual.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's amazing.
Clara Florence Booth was the 14-year-old daughter of Mary Ann, Annie and Thomas Booth, a miner at Mount Morgans. On the 1st of January 1903, Clara was engaged lighting the stove fire when her dress caught fire and she died of burns. Clara's grave is just one of the 57 graves we'll be marking with our engraved plaques during our trip to Mount Morgans in October. We'd like to say thanks to the Shire of Laverton for their support of our project, which enables us to mark these graves. Also, similar sincere thanks to the Shires of Leonora, Wiluna, Menzies and Sandstone, who all make our project possible and a pleasure. I urge all Curtin Radio listeners to get out there and have a look at our work and our history. The countryside has never looked better. It's a fabulous time to
You don't want everyone to get in their cars and caravans and come and follow you, do you?
I'll stay in Perth while they're up there.
But you've got a website, haven't you?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So what is it again?
www.outbackgraves.org.
Okay, if anyone's interested, if they don't want to take the trip, that is. Okay, well, another one?
I thought I'd finish by telling you some nice stories rather than people who have died.
Good.
Eddie Small, and this is a good tale of survival, Eddie Small was one who narrowly escaped death near Mount Morgans. He was some 9 miles out in the mulga when he broke his leg very badly. He was alone, so there was nothing for it but to get himself to Mount Morgans for help. His homemade crutch broke, landing him on some barbed wire, and he finally crawled into town, covered in bites from sergeant ants and barely alive. He'd gone 9 miles with a broken leg.
What a man.
So when he crawled into town, Eddie made it there, he would have been taken to the hospital, which consisted of 2 12 feet by 12 feet Hessian tents, and better facilities were being called for. The Mount Morgans community decided to do something about the appalling state of affairs, so a hospital committee was formed with Mr. Walter Witham, the manager of the guest mine, appointed as honorary secretary. In early 1901, a small 10-bed ward was opened. By August, this had grown to beds for 18 males, 8 females, and 4 cases of infectious diseases. Dr. Crutchley was the medical officer. Don't you love that name? It's like Cardinal Sin or something, isn't it?
Perfect name.
Yeah, Dr. Crutchley was the medical officer, and the hospital was efficiently run first by matron Kay Pollock and later by matron Florence Mackenzie. Medical insurance was 1 shilling for single males and 1 6 for families.
Yeah, good on them.
And we've got a good description of the school. In January 1902, 28 children under the care of the teacher, Mr. Charles McGinley, crowded into the new government schoolhouse. That summer, the temperatures ranged from 107 degrees to 114 degrees Fahrenheit. The schoolhouse was not a flash affair. Lizards and cockroaches nested in the corners of the dirt floor. Boys standing on the planks of the urinal were visible to the entire countryside. The pile of complaints and requests to the education authorities grew over the years, but comfort was never a consideration. The minister commented tartly in reply to one suggestion, "Teachers will have to be content with Hessian line structures like everyone else up there."
Oh, that's a bit rough, isn't it? My goodness, and they kept at it.
Yeah.
Good on them.
And the last story is quite amazing, that there would be a world record holder living in Mount Morgans, but the Mount Morgans Hotel was a commodious building situated on one of the best sites in town. The licence was held by the Clark brothers, and both had always been associated with sport in all its branches. Bill Clark held the championship belt of Australasia for running the 130 yards, which he won in 1886, as well as he held the world record for 50 yards run by him in 5 1/4 seconds.
Goodness
That's
me.
pretty fast.
You know, that red dirt.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And in 1886, Harry Hutchins, the champion of England, came out to Australia and challenged Bill Clark to run the best of 2 out of 3 distances, 50 yards, 100 yards and 130, for a prize of £500 a side. Hutchins won the Sheffield distance, which is the 100 yards, but Bill Clark carried off the other 2 events and established his world record for 50 yards, and he won the £500.
Wow, that is brilliant, isn't
Isn't
it?
that amazing
What
stories?
amazing stories up there. You must love it. You just about feel like you're reliving their lives when you know so much intimacy about them.
You do,
You
yeah.
do, don't you? And you
The
have
ones
and you
we've made
visualise.
plaques for, you feel like you know them.
Yeah. You can visualise their lifestyle a little bit, can't you? The way the women were dressed in those big outfits they had to wear as women back then.
A lot of the photos of these old miners, and they're wearing 3-piece suits and ties and all this stuff.
Incredible.
You know,
Probably
they
from
would have been the management.
probably from the UK.
Probably.
Yeah. Now, we've got a podcast of our chat today, and so many people
Thank
are
you.
interested in what you do. If they go to curtinfm.com.au, they can have a listen to that. And thank you very much. They can go to your website as well if they're interested to find out more. You don't need volunteers or anything, do you?
No, we're going pretty well now. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
We have our annual general meeting on Saturday.
Yeah.
So if people would like to come along and
Where's
become
that?
involved, it'll be at my home. If they just contact us get on to me at Trevor at outbackgraves.org.
Okay,
and
I've
we'll
got
send
that. Details.
The details to you.
Trevor at outbackgraves.org.
Yeah, the AGM is at 2 o'clock.
Okay,
2 p.m.
fantastic. Well, welcome back. Glad you're
Thank
safe. Glad you're sound.
Yeah, we're all
and
good.
just give a few tips to the local drivers up there. Well, the drivers from Perth up there, will you, to take
Yeah,
care?
me. Some of them are just...
What were they doing? What was the biggest
Well,
problem, do you
I
think?
always pull right over on the dirt roads and get right onto the left-hand edge.
If?
But
Why would
a
you
lot
do
of
that?
them just, so you're not throwing stones in their windscreen and you slow down.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If someone's
There's
approaching
a lot
you
of dust.
or wanting to take
Yeah,
over you.
If someone's approaching you.
Approaching, good
And there's a
point.
lot of dust. And so I always pull right over. And these people just think, well, they'll go straight down the middle of the road then. And they go flat out down there and bang, went another windscreen on my car.
Oh, did it?
So,
Have you got insurance anymore?
yeah.
I can't imagine why. That's
In
incredible.
fact, we had seven stars in the windscreen by the time I got home, yeah.
Really? Oh, well, take care, everyone, if you're heading north or south.
just take it
Not
easy.
south.
Drive
south,
slowly.
yeah. Or east or whatever, definitely. Because the wildflower season, people will be heading north
Yeah, it's lovely.
in their droves. Thank you, Trev.
Thanks,
Trevor
Jenny.
Tough joining us.